Coronavirus no some sabi gender e no sabi tribe. It don't kill thousands of Africans around the world because it not been get cure. But the good news now, it don't get vaccine. Coronavirus not all man in business. So tell you people that way you like. On a member say, we all not safe till we all learn safe.
If you want to receive monies from UK, Europe, USA, Canada, Switzerland, and the rest of the world, Supersonic's money transfer has got you covered. With the largest payout network in the Gambia, you can now receive your monies anywhere you are, from Kartong to Koina, with less hassle. Yes! You can receive monies from your family and friends in UK, Europe, USA, Canada, Switzerland, and the rest of the world with our safe, secure, fast, and convenient service that offers you the largest selection of payout locations in the Gambia. Supersonic's money transfer. We are currently in 34 African countries and counting, giving you quality money remittance services that are second to none. Visit the Google Play Store or the Apple Store today to download the Supersonics Money Transfer app and enjoy excellent money transfer services only with Supersonics.
Different Gambians have different views about this, but accountability is beyond the victim. It's about society, making sure that when we speak about never again, it is not just a mere slogan. We are trying to ensure that the culture of impunity that took root in Gambia for 22 years will never again find a home in the smiling coast of Africa. We hope that this conversation will help inform and manage expectations of the public. Through my work with Reed, Brody, Gayso, and Steve Rapp and other partners, we have engaged different stakeholders to look at the technical issues of how to support the government of Gambia with the Gambian people to think of and design and have a roadmap of what to do after the TRC. And this discussion started about a year and a half ago, so that at least today we can speak of having tangible suggestions on the table. Without getting too much into the details of it, I would ask you to listen carefully to the different perspectives that will be brought by experts and passionate rights activists from Liberia. For example, my brother here is the president of the National Bar of Liberia, himself a victim of torture. And as he said to me before, he said Liberia is the grandfather of truth commissions and Gambia is the grandchild. So we would like to hear what are the lessons from Liberia. And Madam Fatou has immense experience, both as a practitioner and as someone who's also been very much invested and infused into dealing with victims and also dealing with fighting for rights of Gambians for many, many, many years. Her perspective will be very, very interesting. Likewise, my sister, Nene, has been at the forefront of fighting when it was very difficult to fight in the Gambia, taking up a lot of many cases of victims of the oppressive and brute regime in those days. And I would really like to get her perspective, having dealt with a lot of victims. On that note, I would like to thank you all for your time, and I wish you a very fruitful and engaging deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. We have a video to show you before we start the presentation. Luis, Omar, the video is called Truth and Justice in the Gambia. Let's go ahead.
Sorry. Now you'll come back, don't worry.
Okay.
See, this part, never again to lights going off. See, huh? So I was just saying that never again to power cuts. There you go.
I think we won't turn to more again.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. So please go ahead and show us the video.
He will come.
Session is on the importance of accountability in the Gambia. Is accountability important, or do we just let everybody accused of human rights violations go without any repercussions? And to speak to us about this topic, we have Nelly Chan, our first speaker, a human rights lawyer, and I think until about 2 years ago, she was the president of FLAG. She's been in private legal practice for more than 20 years now. So Nelly, you have the floor. Please share your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, my learned senior. I would like to stand on the existing protocols. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Special greeting to our international participants, students and leaders. The President of the Bar Association in Liberia, Radford, and everybody. My dad, National Assembly member. This is what happens when you begin to list all protocols we observed. It is my pleasure to be here today to speak. I am told I have only 7 minutes, so I shall try not to bore you. On the importance of accountability. What does it mean? It simply means bringing people to account. Simple as that. The process, the procedure, the norms, getting somebody, the structures of getting somebody, holding somebody into account. The importance of accountability cannot be understated. As Mr. Tal says, after the truth, then what?
Yeah. And it was just...
Sorry? Okay.
No, we'll do the video after the.
Yes.
After this session, we will do it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. It's
Pause the
gone.
video.
Mic is gone.
Pause the video.
It's going on and off.
What is going on? The mic.
It's on now. It's on now.
Yeah, can you turn it on? I
Okay. All right.
I hope you have no problems hearing us. I'm not sure the mic is working.
It's now.
Yeah.
It's off. Okay.
Is it working? Can you hear us?
Yes. Now it's on. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? It's on here, but it's not on. Can you hear me? It says it's on, but I don't know.
Can you hear us from here? I don't think you can. Yeah. It
The one-
doesn't look like the mic is working, so they will have to.
I think they're setting up.
Yeah.
That's on. Yes. Oh, it keeps going on and off. I think it turns itself off. Yes. As I was saying, giving the definition so that we all know what we're talking about when we say accountability. Basically, taking suspects, for example, through the process, the procedures of accounting for their actions, basically. That's what it means. And the UN Office of the Human Rights, the Commissioner for Human Rights, described accountability as consisting of 3 elements: responsibility, the responsibility of the state to prosecute, to bring people to account, and holding the accused person, if convicted, as responsible for having committed the crimes. The second being answerability, which is once he or she is accused, they have to answer to the charges, answer to the allegations and accusations of having committed a crime. And thirdly, enforceability. Otherwise, what is the point? There has to be the power, as the court has, to enforce any judgment that it may give, including orders, sentence, etc. Now, in order to better appreciate the importance of accountability, in our context in the Gambia, a brief reminder of why we're talking about this. For about 22 years, particularly between the 22 years of
movement restriction, and that's probably one of the main events that happens. And
can I not play this and then continue?
we may have to we may not be able to move on because of the protests, because of street blocks.
Can I continue? Okay, that's fine. Yes, I'm saying that we remind ourselves that for 22 years, we've had a regime that has been very brutal and responsible for allegedly a lot of crimes against its own people. Crimes that range from murder to enforced disappearances, from rape to other violations of rights. And the Gambians have been, particularly the victims, have been left traumatized, have been left wanting justice. And they're struggling to understand the process. I know many are. When it began, they expected their perpetrators to be arrested and taken to court right away. But that wasn't possible. The Gambia chose the transitional justice process, which set up the Trrc to find out the truth first, reconciliation, reconcile victims with alleged perpetrators, and to reconcile them and give reparations if where appropriate. And so people who live in this country, particularly the victims, can't understand why it's taken so long. But at the end of the day, we are hopeful that after the commission report, there will be justice. The commission the report will contain recommendations, positive ones, and we believe, and rightly so, that there will be prosecutions of persons who bear the greatest responsibilities for these crimes and violations that have occurred. We have seen over about 300 witnesses, victims as well as alleged perpetrators, and confessions. So we are not just guessing or speculating. We've had confessions of the most heinous crimes coming from testimonies before the Trrc. Now, why do we need accountability? The victims have gone through hell and back. They want justice, as I said. They're suffering pain, physically, mentally, psychologically, personally, directly, or and indirectly, because we have victims who've lost loved ones, and they continue to suffer. And so that is the need to have justice and have accountability so that they can move on. It's very difficult to do that. I talk to them all the time, and they don't understand why it's taking so long. And they want accountability. So that is one reason why we have to have accountability, so that the victims can feel that justice has been done. And the perpetrators of the crimes against them or their loved ones have actually paid for it, basically. Now, our laws of the Gambia, beginning with our constitution and the provision on the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms, as well as other laws, the Sexual Offences Act, the Criminal Code, all prohibit these acts of murder, torture, and other serious crimes that have been committed against the Gambians. And there is the need, there's a responsibility, there is a duty on the state to prosecute crimes when perpetrators are arrested and there's evidence against them. So there's a responsibility on the state to do that. As well as national laws, we have international treaties that we have signed and ratified. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the African Charter, the Human and People's Rights, and other CEDAW and other international and regional instruments that require Gambia to comply and make sure that these crime violations are recognized as crimes and punished. Now, there's also the need to prevent conflict, to prevent violence. If victims feel that nothing has come out of their suffering, they meet their alleged perpetrators every day, free, there's a chance that things might escalate because they have grievances that have not been addressed. Their loved ones have been killed. They've been maimed. A lot of them are living with a lot of pain physically and will perhaps need treatment for the rest of their lives. So it's important that we have accountability for these human rights violations, because if they go unaddressed, as I said, is a recipe for more crimes. And we cannot afford that situation in the Gambia. So, and again, why else? Accountability is a must. Yes, because as I said, the state has the primary duty to protect its population, so it has no choice. So whether or not the victim reconciles with the perpetrator, that really has not much to do with whether or not the alleged perpetrator gets punished. That is a duty. And here, you know, when I speak to a lot of people, some would say, why is there a need to prosecute people? I forgive him. Or he has been forgiven. We've seen the reconciliation on the TV. And so why do you want to, as if it's personal, and it is not, as the president of the bar says. It is that when offenses are committed, they're committed against the state. And the state has a duty to protect its citizens from violations of their human rights. And when it is done, it needs to prosecute. Also, we have to send a message that, you know, impunity cannot be the order of the day anymore. International community has spoken on this, and even a lot of countries have ensured that even if they don't, there are others keeping watch to ensure that perpetrators of crimes, particularly gross human rights violations, are not, don't get away with it. We have people like Reed keeping watch in many countries, and Stephen. So just, you know, to ensure that countries are not indifferent. We know how politicians can be like when it favors them not to prosecute. And so the message has to be sent clear that no to impunity for commission of crimes, particularly serious crimes. Now, I just want to read, if you bear with me, a quote from the former UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan, in 2006, on, I believe it was International Human Rights Day. He says, we have made progress in holding people to account, and this is then, for the world's worst crimes. The establishment of the International Criminal Court, the work of the UN tribunals for Yugoslavia, Rwanda, and the hybrids in Sierra Leone and Cambodia, etc. And the various commissions of experts and inquiry have proclaimed the will of the international community that such crimes should no longer go unpunished. And yet they still do. Unless the indicted persons are brought to court, others tempted to emulate them will not be deterred. Some say that justice must sometimes be sacrificed in the interest of peace. He says, I question that. We have seen in Sierra Leone and in the Balkans that, on the contrary, justice is a fundamental component of peace. Indeed, justice has often bolstered lasting peace by delegitimizing and driving underground those individuals who pose the gravest threat. That is why there should never be amnesty for crimes against humanity and massive violations of human rights, the quote concludes. So it is important to have the accountability. And it's also important to understand that not everybody who's accused of a crime before the TRC will be prosecuted. Only those who bear the greatest responsibilities. And quickly, bringing people to account acts as a deterrent to them and others watching, because if nothing comes out of it, imagine if nothing comes out of the TRC, recommendations are rubbish, the people that are supposed to be charged are not charged. Really, that is serious. So holding perpetrators to account will also restore confidence of victims in the justice system. They will feel that they've, had a day in court, or days, and the persons that are responsible for their pain and suffering, have been brought to book. Now, there is nothing new in prosecuting these cases. The state does it all the time. All the time. I mean, 2 minutes. All the time. The state does it all the time. It prosecutes people for murder, rape on a regular basis, so there's nothing new. And finally, we need the goodwill of the government in order to implement the recommendations of the TRC. And we hope that it will implement all of them and speed ahead as soon as possible, as soon as practically possible, because a lot of delay has already been occasioned. The only choice we have is to deliver justice, deliver a healed and reconciled nation ready to rebuild and forge ahead. We owe it to our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to make sure that the never again slogan is realized. I look forward to the other presentations on the best suited mechanisms for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What we're trying to do, at least make sure we lay the groundwork, at least to try to make it clear how important it is that we have accountability in that. After we will learn from our colleagues with a similar experience, then we will come to what kind of mechanism we feel is best for the Gambia. But Nelly made some great points, but there is one I wanted to emphasize. This is really not about the government doing anybody favors. Our constitution is clear. The treaties we have ratified are all clear, whether we're talking about treaties at the Africa level, treaties at the international level. When a crime is committed, when a right is violated, there is a duty which never changes, imposed on the state to investigate, identify the perpetrator, prosecute the perpetrator, punish the perpetrator, and make sure the victim gets justice. That never, ever changes. So reconciliation cannot change that. At least it's something we have to have at the back of our mind at all times. It's a duty always imposed on the state, in this case, the Gambia government. I will now invite Fatou Jane Senghor, my sister. I'm proud to say Fatou, I think, started her human rights career with my office at HRDA many years ago. And she's been with Article 19 for quite a while, I think more than almost 2 decades. At the moment, she's the executive director of the West Africa office for Article 19, named after Article 19 of the Universal Declaration on right to freedom of expression. Fatou, Senegambia's Iron Lady, you have the floor. Yeah.
I'm very honored and pleased to be part of this important discussion. Good morning, everyone. would like to recognize the victims associations and the families of victims. Our National Assembly member represented here by Tumanjai, our friends from other jurisdictions, read, I would say, the Gambian supporter and our friend who's been with us for a long time. Many people here think really has been there after Jammeh. There's been a lot of polemics. I would like to say we've worked together quite a lot. And I want to say when things were very difficult, especially on case of Alagi Sise, who was condemned and run from prison, read behind the scenes with Human Rights Watch, the Dutch, and many other partners worked with us. He was hiding in Dakar for 8 months. Nobody could play hand. We were all stressed out. And through the different networks, support, we managed to hide him for 8 months. And at the end of the day, Gambia changed, and we are all here today. So sometimes it's good to set some of the records because I think a lot of things happen on the Gambia. Gay has been here with us. We work quite a lot. They've been visible faces. They've been invisible faces. There have been people who did a lot of technical work to get us where we are today. I'm also pleased to see that Dr. Sen is here. I think he's also been a great voice in the diaspora, amplifying our struggle, making sure that in the academia around the world, people will reference Gambia and will know what was happening in the country. Of course, Emmanuel, nobody will introduce him. He's been there, smeared, worked very hard from the African society, doing a lot of public awareness on the TV, writing articles, setting up the coalition after the April 10. And I think today, where he is, I think is also part of his journey and the commitment. Thank you, Stephen, for helping us, sharing your experience. I think we need, in an open world, to have all these experiences, you know, to shape our journey. Our brother from Liberia, we know that we still have unfinished business, but I guess the truth seeking is a big journey, it's a long journey. We Gambians are very impatient because we defeated a dictator through very peaceful means. I think also we defeated a dictator because we came together and we were supported by so many people. And sometimes we take these things for granted. So I think we've been having all these fora on the Gambian transitional agenda. And sometimes one wonders, we've said it all. But I think as a country who's been so close, people were suspicious of each other. Friends will not talk to each other. People will not have conversation on the phone. I think we will not have enough. We need to be speaking out. We need to be having this conversation again and again so that we will heal, but also we will come together and realize that what happened was abnormal so that what we are saying never again will be really a reality. I will not come back to the context we all know after 22 years of negation of all fundamental rights. I think the catalog of violations have been, you know, here to see from the Trrc, but documented in the different reports of organizations. Nene shared a lot. I think some of them went through the courts with brave lawyers who supported. I also want here to salute, I'm a bit biased, gay, but you'll understand, the women lawyers. I think they've stood when it was needed. I remember the case of Mariam Denton, where things were very rough and many people didn't want to stand. The female lawyers were there. I remember a lot of other cases of all those sexual violence, especially during the Solo Sendeng saga. The female lawyers were there, you know, sneaking, going into the prison, taking the information to the international community so that we know what was happening. So I think there's been a lot done by the legal practitioners, especially women. But what I think has been the missing link is that unity that we are having today. Because of the climate of fear, I think people were suspicious of each other. People didn't want to speak to each other. And I think that has also entrenched the regime, emboldened it somehow, but also divided the country. So we are here with a divided country, with people still negating what happened. So how do we ensure that what happened remains in the archive so that our children, our grandchildren will know that during these 2 decades, these atrocities happened in the Gambia, and they were committed by Gambians in most instances. Yesterday, I heard Sira mention the fact that the TRRC sold quite a lot, the reconciliation and reparation. And I think people are still wondering what kind of justice we can expect. I think these are the conversations that we need to have. Another point that I want to raise is the fact that we all forget, but the coalition 2016 came about under the agenda of reconciliation. So the TRRC was part of the agenda and an election campaign. And also it was important that during those discussions, it was clear that we wanted to set up a TRRC. So what the government post-Jammeh did was kind of a social demand, but also a commitment to ensuring that we will have openness and accountability. So today we are here waiting for the TRRC report. We are anticipating. We are also learning from what happened in the other countries, and I think we are in the good path. This is a marathon. Sometimes, because talking to all these expert human rights, experienced lawyers and advocates, I think we know that it's not going to be an easy journey, because there are people who are interested in us sweeping everything under the carpet because they benefited or because they have a guilt feeling because of their action or inaction. So it's going to be a struggle to ensure that accountability will happen. We've seen a lot of impunity during the past regime. Post-Jammeh, we've seen some human rights violations, and people were hoping that they will be addressed. Until today, we've seen some reports that are in the drawers. I think that it are also not good signs for the progress, but these are processes that have been documented. At least this is good. So, but we need to continue to push forward. Nene mentioned quite a lot why it is important to have accountability. I also want to link it to the right to truth. It's very important, the right to truth to be told. Everybody has said the TRRC has revealed a lot in us, but also a lot has been said in the TRRC, but I think a lot also is, not said. And this is why it's important to have proper mechanism, accountability mechanism through a judicial body to ensure that the full picture is known. It will be difficult, it will take long, but at least we've seen a lot of denial. People didn't say the truth when they testified. So I do believe that we need, through more investigation, more hearings through courts, through CASI, to other bodies, to really get the full picture and also ensure that all those people who are responsible are prosecuted in a fair manner. We want to also bring the issue of victims. We've been talking about it, all of us. I do believe that for the country to heal, we are very small as a country. We all know each other. And it's very difficult sometimes to be fair in the Gambia, depending on who is, involved. We set the rules, but we bend them. And in Wolof, we say generally, lahadom dordom. In 2017, at the university, we had an inaugural discussion around the TRRC. It was there. And when we said that if we want the process to work, we need to be fair. We need to treat everybody equally. And what we tend to do, and we can see it even in the recycling of officials. It depends on where you are standing, who your relatives are, who your friends are. People tend to defend perpetrators, and even people who are in the struggle, people who fought for human rights, because so-and-so is your family member, is your friend, so it's okay for them to be recycled because they are good people, because that's your personal relationship with. But those people have committed things in the, so you need to also, I think these have been also a challenge we've seen in the Gambia, where people protect certain perpetrator or alleged perpetrators because they are close friends or family. And I think that is also something that we need to be, very careful with going forward. As a country, we are too small. We need to ensure that those perpetrators will not continue to walk free in the streets, because that could create revenge. That will not help the victims to heal, but also that will continue to keep us in this malaise of suspicion, but also it will continue to open the wounds of the past. I think Gambians are still traumatized. We have big unfinished business. It's only for more than 4 years. I think it will take another decade or more for all these processes to get to a closure. So we need to be strong. We need to keep together. We need also to ensure that we keep to our goalposts, because I think there's been a lot of distraction. There have been also a lot of political uncertainties, but I guess these are things that will distract us for a while. But I think the longer term objective is that if we keep to our battle, if we keep to our principles, we will get justice for the victims. And I want also to say lastly that we need to continue to keep the victim at the heart of the process, not only for the legitimacy's sake, but also I think for the ethical, it's a moral imperative that whatever we are doing, we keep the victim, because they suffered, they lost loved ones, they know how it feels to be in this. So the technical is great, because without that, we cannot go. So we need to strike a right balance between the big picture thing and also the life of the victims, so that at least the fight will be balanced, will be morally acceptable. And I think we need to be objective in going forward. I just like also to say that all the approaches to uncovering the facts about past human rights violations are very important, because they are all mechanisms for accountability. As such, they are not luxury, but precondition for those who are trying to put a history of abuse behind them and construct new society based on open dignity and respect for human rights. We need to ensure that the truth is at the center, so that the right to truth is fundamental in the accountability. We are not truthful. If the truth is not told, it will be very difficult to get full accountability. The former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Nabili, once said, and I quote, "At the core of any effort to establish accountability are three indispensable and interlinked rights: the right to truth, the right to justice, and the right to an effective remedy and reparation." And I think we've started to open up. The truth seeking has been partly completed, it's partial. With all these mechanisms and all these plans, I think we will get to a fairer picture. Of course, reparation have started, partly monetary, partly also some support, psychological and medical. This is not enough. We need more in terms of reparation. And I think the monetary aspect is the least. I think there are more important reparation mechanisms that we need to be looking into. And the big picture, and the most important thing now that is left, that will be the most challenging, is now the real accountability for those who bear the greatest responsibility. And when we say that, we don't mean only Yahya Jammeh, we mean also the other key people, especially in the security forces. And I do believe that, as a way of concluding, we should not condone or allow anybody who committed serious human rights violations to continue to hold public office, especially in the security, because that will defeat the whole purpose of the transition, the whole purpose of security sector reform, and also the protection of victims, because tomorrow all the victims will be shot if they realize that those people who committed human rights violation are still in the uniform and they hold high office. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Garisano. Thank you for reminding us to do the truth in our push for accountability, and also to be fair. I think those are extremely important. Again, also reminding us, no matter what we do, we have to have victims. at the forefront. Happy to say we have victim associations with us today. I think the chairperson of the victim center is here. Yeah, and of course members of this office. And our good sister Sarah. It's now that I didn't know Professor Sayed was here. Don't blame me, because every time I see him, he looks younger. And the mask did not help. But you most welcome. So, Louis, can we please have a video? It's just about, it's a 7-minute video. It's called Truth and Justice in the Gambia. Thank you. Louis, please go ahead.
You can use it. This center, this center.
Senor Nene did a great job trying to make us understand why accountability is important. But we all know we're not an island. There is a lot we can learn from countries that have gone through a similar process in the past. And with us to share the Liberia experience is Mr. Tiawan Gonglo. Mr. Gonglo is the president of the Liberia Bar Association. And some time ago, he was also the Solicitor General of Liberia. Very well experienced. And I'm made to understand he also was, a victim of brutality that went on in that country, in going to the 80s. Yeah, Mr. Gonglo, it's an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you. Permit me to stand on this protocol established by Brother Gay and the President of the Gambia Bar. Let me see. I didn't write what I would say today because I want to speak to you from my heart, from my experience. And I'm reminded by some of the things that were just said. There can be no excuse for accountability. Accountability is a must, and there's no option, no other option if we want to have a peaceful society. One of the reasons is that there will always be some sort of moral justification for violence by the perpetrators. In Liberia, there was a brutal military dictatorship that had victimized a lot of people who were in exile. And a crooked man who was head of GSA, the General Services Agency, who had been accused of stealing so much money in the procurement process, Mr. Charles Taylor, organized and came to Liberia as a liberator to free the Liberian people from the repressive military regime. Although he did not intend to do any better, in fact, the experience showed that he did worse. Then, Mr. Yahya Jammeh and others became part of the peacekeeping force that was organized for the first time by ECOWAS to intervene in Liberia, enforce or create a ceasefire and monitor it. I saw Yahya Jammeh myself in Monrovia. I was a member of the interim government, serving as executive assistant to Dr. Sawyer. And I saw Yahya Jammeh many times. He was a captain in the military police. I still imagine him with his red band. He came back to Gambia, and we were informed in Liberia, a group of soldiers, to request for their accrued service. And then the end result was a military coup. Some sort of moral reason for this action, that there was a government that was derelict and that was not responsible in taking care of its soldiers. Captain Valentin Trrc from Sierra Leone returned to Sierra Leone and overthrew the government of Sierra Leone for the same reason that the government didn't take care of them. I'm saying this to say all of these things started in Liberia. And if the perpetrators are not held accountable, others will repeat what they've done and do worse than what happened before. They are children of victims who will get magnified stories of what actually happened, and then they will revenge beyond what was done to their parents, because they will take the entire Gambian society as co-conspirators against the parents, and they will act without distinction. The other thing is that perpetrators, or let me say most perpetrators, never admit they're wrong. They always justify. We've seen people appear before Trrc in Liberia and say, I never killed a fly, even though they kill human beings. As a victim myself, because I was representing journalists, human rights advocates, pro-democracy activists, and opposition politicians, Mr. Taylor put me in jail one night, and the next morning I was on the stretcher going to the hospital with my kidneys damaged. 3 days in a row, I couldn't use the latrine, I couldn't use the restroom. And when the doctor showed me in the x-ray, there were 2 black dots. Finally, by the aid of the doctor, started to urine, it was darker than anything I've seen, blood. But the man who arrested me till today says he never arrested me. And that's the thing about perpetrators. They are dishonest. Even when there are 3 or 4 persons testifying against them, they still have the guts to say it did not happen. He lives in America, and I think he applied for other citizenship or residency status. And he was confronted that Councillor Gonglo, the Solicitor General of Liberia, said you arrested him and he was tortured. He actually went in the newspaper and said, the man, he named another security officer. And this young man who arrested me is even darker than me, but the man he said arrested me was so light that he looked like a mulatto. And so my response was, I've never been to a mental home, and I still remember who arrested me, and the time and everything. But if this man was not prepared to admit that he arrested a human rights lawyer who at that time of his denial was Solicitor General, what do you think about ordinary people? So there has to be accountability for what happens. Liberia was the first that faced this mindless brutality against other human beings. But Sierra Leone has had its Truth Commission. It has put a closure to the conflict in Sierra Leone by holding those who bear the greatest responsibility accountable. So one can say there is sustained peace in Sierra Leone, and the peace in Sierra Leone is lasting. We can judge from the Nuremberg trials. Since World War II, and people were held accountable, nothing of such nature has happened again. So there's something that we can learn from. This idea of let bygones be bygones, let's forget. Even as enlightened as I am, I have not forgotten what happened to me. And nobody has the authority to tell me to forget. That's not your business. It didn't happen to you, it happened to me. We have to take victims into consideration at all times. What happens? Forgiveness is something that should be exclusively preserved for the victims, not for anyone to tell them. No one needs to summarize to them, because there are people who are living with the scars, psychological, physical, economical. Some people lost whatever they had forever. And then you come and say, you know, you need to forget. You need to be forgiven. You have no authority. In fact, to say that makes you look like you are siding with the perpetrator. The sympathy for those who say, let's forgive and forget, is actually with the perpetrators, which is not fair to society. The other thing is, we look at the draft yesterday. Any legal paper that is drafted, if 3 lawyers look at it, they will have 3 different views. Lawyers will always comment. The draft that we have is a very good draft. It drew lessons from the draft that the Liberians made, Sierra Leonean draft, ICTR, ICTY, everywhere. So it is. It's not unique. It's not the first time it's happening. So it's a good document. Working and continue to serve the will. In Liberia, the process ended 2009, more than a decade ago. Recommendations are given. President Sirleaf, who came to power on the campaign for protecting human rights because she was a victim herself, did not muster the political will to implement the recommendations because she was named as a perpetrator. And the best she could have done was, in the interest of Liberian peace and stability, let me resign for the process to go on. That would have been the highest moral ground. It didn't happen. And then when Mr. George Weah was in opposition, every day his partisans were in the street agitating for establishment of war crimes tribunal. They came to power and they are not talking about it again. And when people talk about it, they say, oh, that's not important now. We're talking about development, we're talking about other issues. So it's the question of political will. And we should not expect political will to come by itself. We victims, we people of Gambia and Liberia should demand political will by different actions. After all, in a democratic society, the most powerful tool that the people have is their votes. So elections are coming up in the Gambia. Let the civil society organizations here, the Bar Association, everyone, make the issue of establishment of this extraordinary code a campaign issue and compel all of the politicians to make a solemn promise. Let them declare, each of the political parties, that when I come to power, when the recommendations are made and prosecutions are recommended, I will implement. Demand it from each of them and use it to monitor their governance in the future. It should be the single most important issue. They will never by themselves muster the will to do it, because power corrupts. When people get to power, the next thing they're thinking is the next term, and then they start engaging in compromises. I believe some of them have happened here in Gambia, where compromises have taken place. And these compromises are against the supreme interest of the people, which is peace and stability, through holding people accountable. That's all I can say to you. because I don't want you to forget that it is important for you to find ways to hold the current political actors and those who want to occupy the seats that they occupy now accountable by making them to make clear declarations in clear and unambiguous terms that they will be on the side of the Gambian people by committing themselves to accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gombo. You can tell from the layman, of course, that that really was, powerful. So for me, the message is, let's not do it the Liberia way. There were human rights violations, but unfortunately, of course, mechanisms meant to be set up, but that hasn't happened because the political will isn't there. And when you keep sweeping all these things under the carpet, someday, there would be an explosion. So I think that's really a very good lesson we can learn from our brother or from our neighbors, Liberia. Accountability always, and we really don't have to compromise on that. Thank you. It was an honor having you here. If the video is ready, I think we can proceed. Can we? What we want to do now, we wanted to start with the first one, truth and justice. But to make sure there is a flow, we have a video from a victim called Clema Abaifuta, who is Chadian. We all are aware of the human rights during the Habre era. We also know Habre was prosecuted and found guilty. So Clema is here to share his experience. If the video is ready, we can start with him. Then after that, we go to the Gambia video, just to make sure we have a flow. We now hear it from victims from other countries. Yeah, thank you.
The President of Association of Victims of Senabre regime. As a prisoner, in Senabre secret jail in Chad, for 4 years, I was forced, to bury my fellow detainees in the mass grave. Several hundreds in all now. They died of disease, of starvation, and others. After the Senabre has overthrown, we began the struggle. It was not easy at all. There were many obstacles, many difficulties. Senabre accomplices attacked us for what we were doing, what good job. Even our lawyers, Jackie Mudina, was, almost killed in a assassination attempt. But we didn't give up. I know that it is very important for you, my friend of Gambia, the victim of Gambia, because most of politicians refuse to give us justice. We had to go to Senegal, to Belgium, to United Nations, to African Union, and International Court of Justice to claim justice, because it is important for a victim to claim on justice. But one more, we didn't give up because you have this conviction that you are doing a good job in the right way. Finally, after 25 years struggling, fighting, a court in Senegal convicted Senabre and sentenced him into life, prison. And after Senabre was convicted in 2017, we went to Ghana. After that day, we went to Ghana to meet our friends, our brothers of this country, because a German of the country, the kids, and as Senabre was to be brought to court, I think, and I have this conviction that even Yahya Jammeh, because of all he did, very bad things, he can be put to prison, or he can be brought to justice. I can notice that you began that since that day when we went to Gambia to meet you, you began to a campaign for justice. You began to claim justice because it is a right, the right to claim, justice, and you did campaign to truth, So, Yahya Jammeh, the last president, he left the country, but when he left the country, again, because of torture, because of many things, he looked against, he understood that. And now, I can say that your fight to go to trade, to justice begins. In my concern or of my condition is, we Chadian, we have to bring our support to the battle. To be on your side, because this is our goal, to make, to build an Africa, a new Africa without impunity. We have to build, the army without laws, without corruption, without dictatorship. And I think that we will win, because it is a good job and it is a good thing for us to fight this a new nation of justice. And you have to trust us, because I think that you and us, we are doing a good job. As we used to say in chat, do some fun, and we are together. Let the justice win in Africa.
Thank you. Go to first. It's not this one. The first one on truth and justice in the Gambia. That's the one we're looking for. It's always good to hear from.
He broke my family.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Into pieces, and then he broke so many families into pieces. My dad went missing when I was just 14 years old. he was against things that Yaya has been doing. Sometimes I find it so hard to understand these things.
Some people liked him, loved him, and didn't believe what people were telling them.
For 22 years, Yaya Jammeh was the president of Gambia. His rule was marked by the torture and killing of dissenters, the arrest of journalists, sexual violence, massive corruption. In January 2017, Jammeh fled to Equatorial Guinea. And now, details of the Jammeh government's crimes are coming out.
Good morning, everyone. I call to order the first public meeting of the TRRC.
This is an investigation into the mass atrocities that occurred in this country between 1994 and 2017.
The testimonies that came out at the Truth Commission, the TRRC, have implicated Jammeh personally in many of the worst crimes.
Yaya Jammeh told you what?
He told me clearly, you have to execute the ringleaders.
And that is what you did.
Exactly.
Everybody is glued to their TVs, their phones, on Facebook, just to hear from people who had killed people, from people who had tortured people.
Said, let's kill these people and cut their flesh into pieces.
Cut them up into pieces. Like they would do me.
The Gambia was a place where a dictator was operating undercover. We have also seen a lot of non-Gambians being killed in Gambia, being imprisoned for nothing.
These people are mercenaries. The order from the head of state, the former president, Yaya Jammeh, they are all to be executed.
One man survived to tell the story of the massacre of 59 West African migrants.
After my lies, I have my hand out for you. This is God who wants to save you. Tell the world what Yaya Jammeh have done to us and how they have killed us.
I hope justice will be safe and the case will be brought before law.
Jammeh organized a phony AIDS program which forced HIV-positive Gambians to give up their medicines and put themselves in his personal care.
And the rules was that anyone that came for the treatment, you were told you were using ARV, you would have to stop it.
Some died, no matter how much we tried. Why these people died? It's because of the length they stayed at the presidential treatment program.
Yeah, Jammeh was very powerful and cunning. He targeted young women from vulnerable families and using state institutions and resources to ensure that women could not say no.
There was a whole system for you to exploit, train you, rape. He said, let's see if you are a virgin. And swear to God, I was scared. My justice, most importantly, includes a whole system change so that we can prosecute. This afternoon to be a little less scary.
Now the Truth Commission will recommend that those behind the worst crimes be prosecuted, and it will be up to the government to seek Jammeh's extradition.
It is the last hope for many victims. Their fear every day is that it is all going to come to naught. I urge this government to implement every single recommendation that will come out of this commission.
I just have one wish. I wish I will have the opportunity to face Yaya himself and then ask him why he has to kill my dad.
The least that a victim needs is the truth. So the testimonies and the stories of these people makes people know who Jammeh really was. justice for all of those people means Jammeh would pay for everything that he had done.
Thank you. I think that was. Anyway, thank you all very much. I think we've done with two panels. That we cannot run away from accountability, that this country needs accountability. We cannot have genuine healing if there is no accountability. In fact, I sometimes would say, I think the way we go as a country would depend on the way we treat the recommendations of the TRRC. So we have heard from our brother from Liberia, explaining the danger if you don't go for accountability. It's about sweeping a lot of horrible stuff under the carpet. And we know there is a danger that might explode at some point. Liberia did it that way. People like Mr. Congo are pushing for that to change, but that hasn't changed yet. So making it clear to us, no matter what we do, we must never go the Liberia way. We also heard from Clement, the Chad way. Even though it took close to 18, 20 years for Mr. Harvey to be brought to justice, but we know it finally happened. And of course, that really was very, important healing for his victims, as we heard from Clement. So now, for this panel, now that we all agree there is a need for us to hold certain people accountable, what kind of accountability mechanism are we really talking about? Are we, for example, saying whoever is, identified as being responsible for the most serious or the greatest violations should be dragged before the ICC? Or are we asking for the Habre kind of trial, like it happened in Senegal, or the Sierra Leone kind of tribunal, as it happened in Sierra Leone? Or do we call for them to be prosecuted at the local level? If we call for a prosecution at the international level, what do we have in mind? A little bit of international, local level, hybrid? Or if we call for them to be prosecuted before the courts of the Gambia, what kind of mechanisms do we need to put in place? Do we, for example, need to change some of our laws? Do we really need to train our prosecutors? Do we need to train our judges? All these are really very, very interesting questions. And we're lucky to have with us a group of very eminent people. We have Mr. Howard Bani, who works for the ICTJ as a senior program officer. He definitely would tell us a lot about the South Africa experience. Mr. Stephen Rapp, who will be speaking after Mr. Howard Bani. For Mr. Rapp, when it is time to speak, I think I'll just invite Lee to have him introduced properly. I think he would do better than I would. And of course, we have the president of our bar association, Mr. Salim Tal, to also give us his thoughts as to the kind of mechanism we should go for. And Rick Brody too here, very much involved in the Habre trial. Is it the dictator hunter? Some people might want to call him, would also at least give us his thoughts as to what mechanism we should go for. And in addition, we also have, a short video, a BBC video, which we want to show all of you. Please, we're not starting this session with any assumptions. It's really not about, a bunch of outsiders coming in to tell us this is what Gambia must do. That's not the issue here. It's just about sharing their thoughts. Somebody like Mr. Rapp was a prosecutor at the Sierra Leone Tribunal, was a prosecutor at the ICC, and of course, that's the Rwanda Tribunal. And at some point was, the U.S. ambassador at large for war crimes. So he has really tremendous experience. And like I said, not just him, all the panelists, so much we can learn from them. It's about telling us this is what was done or what was not done. Probably Gambia can look into this, Gambia can look into that. Maybe your situation is best covered this way. Just suggestions we're going to put on the table. And like I said at the very beginning, at the end of all the presentations, we definitely will be happy to hear your thoughts or probably answer a question or two from all of you. So with that, is Mr. Barney available online? Please, sorry? Yeah, the other panel, yes, yeah. Oh, sorry about that. Can we have a Mr. Stephen Rapp, Ambassador Rapp on the high table? Thank you very much, Nene and so thank you. Reed, can we also have you here? We are on the outside in time. Yes, that's okay. You are your co-organizer, so that's fine. Yeah. Thank you, thank you. That was, yeah. Is Mr. Rani ready? Is he ready? Rani.
Yes, Chairperson, not sure if I can be seen or heard.
Yes. We can hear you well. So we're starting off with you, the Senior Program Advisor for the ICTJ. Mr. Vani, you have the floor. Thank you very much for joining us. You were with us yesterday and it's so kind of you to be with us today as well. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairperson. Firstly, my apologies that I can't be with you in Banjul. So my short input this morning is titled Dedicated Capacity for the Investigation and Prosecution of International Crimes as well as Crimes of the Past. And Chair, I start with an observation, and that is that notwithstanding the appalling nature of atrocity crimes we've seen in so many conflict situations, most perpetrators do not face justice. Chair, we saw that just in the presentation from our friend from Liberia. Typically, machineries of justice are not as expeditious, organized, or focused as the machineries behind violence. And currently, most administrations of justice are really no match for the well-oiled machines of mass atrocity. So it is time to look at ways of gearing up the fight against impunity. So I want to explore a broad distinction of approach between countries that leave such crimes to the whims of the general administrations of justice, such as in my own country, South Africa, and those that adopt a specialized or dedicated approach. In fact, this is the subject matter of a paper that is due to be launched by ICDJ in December. And the genesis of our study emerges from efforts to persuade the South African government to create a dedicated capacity to investigate and prosecute apartheid-era crimes which have been long neglected. Some of you might be aware we have our own Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and several hundred murder cases were referred by our TRC to the prosecution authorities, and they were virtually all abandoned. So the starting premise in our study is that the generalized approach to crimes of the past almost always underdelivers, whereas the dedicated approach tends to produce results. Specialized or dedicated prosecutorial and investigative capacities are entities created to focus exclusively on a particular category of crimes. They are typically located within a prosecution authority, perhaps in the police service or other state agency, or even an independent body. And personnel attached to such units tend to be recruited for their demonstrated expertise and experience. The rationale behind the establishment of such specialized units are a few. So, for example, you establish these units to concentrate and centralize national efforts under one organizational entity to facilitate coordination, exchange of information and leads, and to establish clear lines of responsibility. The buck has to stop somewhere. If it's in a generalized system, the buck simply doesn't stop with anybody. We also want to have motivated and well-capacitated, skilled investigators and prosecutors with the necessary expertise. We want to promote specialized and focused attention on identified cases
without being distracted and diverted onto other matters. In South Africa, as a legal representative for many victims, often knocking on doors of prosecutors, time and time again we were told they have more important cases to deal with, more current cases. And ultimately, you want to foster close cooperation between investigators and prosecutors. So in our study, we focused on looking at a comparative survey of specialized units around the world, and we came across at least 23 of such units. We noticed that there were historical units. These are units set up to investigate crimes of the past. There are at least 8 of these units, such as in Australia, Argentina, Poland, Germany, Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, and Lithuania. We also discovered that there were these units which we've called new generation units, often set up when countries wish to implement their obligations under their own statute, and sometimes to invoke the principle of universal jurisdiction to pursue international crimes. And there are at least 8 of these units in Belgium, Sweden, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, the US, and the UK. We also came across what we refer to as mixed mandate units. Typically, these units would be investigating historical cases, the crimes of the past, as well as more current international crimes. We came across 6 such units in Canada, Uganda, Finland, Switzerland, and Denmark. And then we looked at those countries which didn't adopt a specialized approach, such as in Peru, the UK, Kenya, and Tunisia. So our research suggests that countries with specialized units are likely to achieve considerable more success when compared to countries without dedicated capacities. Indeed, there appears to be a direct correlation between the numbers of serious international crimes prosecuted and the existence of specialized units. Those countries with dedicated capacities pursue higher numbers of cases than those without. So countries with dedicated capacities, such as Argentina, Germany, and France, have reasonably impressive track records compared with those that left crimes of the past and international crimes to the vagaries of the national criminal justice system. So, looking at a few of the countries which didn't adopt specialized approaches, starting with Peru, there you had prosecutors dealing with cases referred by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and yet time and time again they were deflected from handling these cases because they were directed to devote their attention to pension and tax fraud cases. The United Kingdom adopted a very disjointed approach to the troubles in Northern Ireland, and their disjointed approach saw only 9 cases out of more than 900 referred to the Public Prosecution Service being prosecuted with no convictions. Kenya failed to establish a specialist capacity to investigate and prosecute the post-election violence of 2007, and that resulted in total impunity for those who orchestrated that carnage. So while Tunisia established a specialized criminal chamber within its judiciary to deal with crimes committed during the Ben Ali regime, they somehow neglected to equip those chambers with a dedicated investigative and prosecutorial capacity. And the results speak for themselves. After 3 years of work, not a single verdict has been delivered of the Tunisian specialized chambers. In our study, we interviewed 10 practitioners in the field, and if I may quote one of them, Stephen Rapp, who coincidentally is our next panelist, he explained why ordinary law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies are not in a position to effectively investigate and prosecute crimes of the past. He said, you fundamentally run into problems with busy prosecutors, complicated cases, lots of different priorities, understaffing, inadequate legal and justice systems, not to mention the specialized skills that are necessary to put these cases together. The fact that they're involved in different kinds of complex crimes committed in different ways by organizations. You need a detailed understanding of the structures of power and violence. Who really pulled the strings? Who went along for the ride? All of those things take real multidisciplinary skills, which are not going to be available within an ordinary office that's dealing with crimes of all sorts. So in our study, we come to certain conclusions. That is that crimes of the past are unlikely to see the light of day unless a country takes certain steps. Firstly, the country ought to create a dedicated and specialized investigative and prosecutorial capacity. It needs to provide strong material and political support to the entity established and its objectives. It should promote prosecution-led multidisciplinary investigations with close collaboration between investigators and prosecutors under one roof. And Chair, these steps should be taken regardless of what model of accountability is ultimately chosen in the Gambia, whether it be a special hybrid court or a special chamber within the judiciary, or simply before the ordinary courts of the Gambia, a dedicated investigative and prosecutorial capacity focused exclusively on these cases will be needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gwani. I think you really did justice to your paper by, making references to so many countries around the world, at least sharing the experiences of those countries from Kenya to the UK to Peru, Tunisia, etc. Thank you. So we now will move on to our second speaker, Mr. Stephen Rapp. And for Mr. Rapp, I think I will let Mr. Reed introduce him to the audience. Because he did yesterday, and I don't think I can mic that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gay. Thank you. We are very lucky. Stephen Rapp is a legend in the field of transitional justice. In addition to having been the Barack Obama's ambassador for war crimes, in addition to being the former prosecutor of the Sierra Leone Tribunal, the chief of prosecutions under Hassan Jallow of the Rwanda Tribunal, there is not a transitional justice in the world today that Stephen is not involved in. And I found out 2 days ago that he'd been to 141 countries. Although he counts them, the way he counts them is not the way I would have counted them. But anyway, Stephen was with Clement Abai-Fouta in Chad. He came to Senegal several times. He was the person who really spearheaded the U.S.'s involvement in the Hissan Habre case. Just talking to him, and I'm sure as you will hear, it is just a wealth of knowledge, but also of genuine commitment. This is a man who has a passion for seeing that victims receive justice.
Well, thank you very, very much, Reed, for that introduction, and it's good to be with keep slipping off. Good to be with all of you, and back in Gambia. I was here 13 months ago, even during COVID, following all the rules, so the ferry wasn't running, so I rode a pirogue over the river and engaged with a number of you at that time. And of course, when I was a prosecutor, special court for Sierra Leone down the coast, I was often in the Gambia, frankly, because we had witnesses from the Gambia and people who were endangered in Sierra Leone for their testimony, whom we relocated to this country. Gay said earlier, talking about those of us that come from outside who are here speaking with you, Please understand, we're not here to tell you what to do. This is your country, your decision, your future. All I can do is to share the experiences that I've had working in other places, the mistakes that we've made, the successes that we've had, and then help you in developing the tools to do exactly the job that you decide needs to be done. That is what it's all about. Now, I remember when I was here last time and I was at the Victim Center and gave a press conference, I spoke of the value of the hybrid model, and of course, John and his friend said, "Oh, he's telling you that's what you need to do. He's bringing his justice to the Gambia, not your justice." But I was talking about hybrids, and I'll talk about that again today, because this is a tool that you can use. On the other hand, the advantage of the hybrid approach is you can use just the parts of it that you want, and you can design it and work out the situation in order to deal with any deficiencies or any problems with the current system in taking care of these cases. My own experience, you've heard I was a special court prosecutor. I was the one that brought trial. I finished the prosecutions of the 9 defendants that we tried in Freetown and started and ran through the prosecution case against Charles Taylor, a case that we, for reasons of security, moved outside of Freetown, moved actually to The Hague, though we had hoped to move it elsewhere in Africa. But I had that experience in that court, which is a mixed court, a hybrid court. But I had also worked previously for 8 years as a federal prosecutor in my own country, as a United States attorney in my home state of Iowa in the 1990s, before I went to the Rwanda Tribunal for 6 years, where I started as a senior trial attorney leading the trial of those responsible for the hate media. And then when Hassan Jallow was appointed a prosecutor of that court in 2003, the following year, he promoted me to chief of prosecutions, which meant leading all of the trials in more than a dozen trial teams, where we were prosecuting 75 or so leaders of the Rwandan genocide. Then thereafter, I was appointed by Kofi Annan to become the chief prosecutor of Sierra Leone court. Now, the difference between Sierra Leone and the Rwanda Tribunal is we were a mixed court, we were a hybrid. We were not a court established by the UN Security Council, which is what happened with the Rwanda Tribunal and the Yugoslavia Tribunal. Instead, it was a court that was established because Sierra Leone wrote to the UN and said, help us establish a court. And there ended up being an agreement between the UN and the government of Sierra Leone that was approved by the Parliament of Sierra Leone. It was a treaty. And under the terms of that treaty, it was possible to do things that it would not have been possible to do under the laws of Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone had head of state immunity. You couldn't prosecute a Charles Taylor. They'd never adopted a war crimes statute. They'd never adopted a crimes against humanity or torture statute. And they certainly didn't, if they went ahead and did it after the fact, that would have violated their constitution. But if we had an international court, we could use international law that was in effect during the 1990s when these crimes were committed. And we also were able to do things much more flexibly than possible at the Rwanda Tribunal. For one thing, we could use far more people from Sierra Leone, and 65% of the employees were Sierra Leoneans. And unlike the Rwanda Tribunal that tried its cases over in Tanzania, 800 kilometers from the scene of the crime, we tried all the cases except for Taylor in Freetown, within sight of where many of the horrific crimes were committed. And the court had a mixed jurisdiction. I was the prosecutor appointed by the Secretary General of the UN. The deputy prosecutor that I saw that came in under my administration was appointed by the president of Sierra Leone, Joseph Kamara, who was later Minister of Justice. He was the deputy, and the judges were mixed between international and national judges. And of course, many of the international judges came from elsewhere in Africa. It still was imperfect, because I frankly, even as an international, thought we were too international, that we that we were too separated from the national system. We didn't do everything that we could, though I tried to work on it, to develop a stronger relationship with the national system so that we'd leave a legacy, a rule of law, and an ability to deal with cases. But of course, many of the people in the court, like Joseph Kamara, others who were judges and prosecutors, moved back into the Sierra Leone system, as did the police, and have benefited maintaining the rule of law in that country and going after cases of public corruption, and creating a situation where we had a country where twice political power has changed between the two major political parties without lethal violence. So I think it was a success to that extent, but it leads me always to the point of view that I would prefer to have things done as close as possible to the scene of the crime, as close as possible to the national system, and only add international elements to the extent that they're strictly necessary. Now, our friend Howard here a moment ago talked about specialized units, and these can be developed, as in most of the cases that he discussed, within national systems. And you establish a special prosecutor's office, a special division of the police, and then certainly a special division of the courts. And sometimes that's sufficient to do the job. If you don't do that, as he said, if you just say, oh, well, these can be handled within the normal court system, one day the judges will be hearing an ordinary bank robbery or some other kind of crime. The next day, they're going to be hearing about crimes committed by a dictatorship and a security structure over the course of 22 years. Well, those are quite different kinds of crimes, and you can't easily transfer the sort of ways in which crimes are committed by individual perpetrators on the spur of the moment with the ways that they are actually done by a whole organized security system led by a dictator, where sometimes explicit orders aren't given, and where there's a whole machinery in which the crimes are committed. So these are very different things, and you need that kind of specialized knowledge, as he said. But beyond that, there can be issues that really require you to have some internationalization. Now, how do you get to internationalization is sort of the Sierra Leone formula. It would be a formula of the people of this country, basically, through the leadership that you elect, saying, let's sit down with ECOWAS, for instance, or with the African Union or with the UN, but preferably with ECOWAS, because obviously we have ECOWAS victims and the Ghanaians that we all know about, and we just saw the survivor of those killings that happened 15 years ago. But you work out an agreement with an international organization, and you approve that agreement. And in that agreement, there's a statute for the court, and that court then provides how the court would take place. And then there's also the question of how it's financed. And of course, doing these things right and making sure that there's the security, that there's the adequate investigation, that there's witness protection, and that people have good defense. All of those things are expensive, and they require most often assistance of donors. And most often these committees, these courts then have donors committees of international donors that review budgets and make sure that, though it's a constant process of pushing for funding, that there's funding to provide for the necessary components of the court. But the management of the court is the way it's decided in the agreement that would be negotiated by this country and the international body. And to be frank, I think if the leadership that's elected on December 4th and others go forth to ECOWAS and say, this is what we want, I think it's frankly a situation where ECOWAS would say, yes, we will assist and be the partner in that and agreeing to it to make it an internationalized court. Now, the question about internationalization, why do it and how much of it to do? There's really three basic problems or deficiencies that require internationalization. In other words, the creation of a hybrid between national and international. One is because of legal limitations in the national system. 2 is because of capacity limitations in the national system. And 3 is because of doubts or concerns about the will within the national system to provide what's needed to deliver independent justice. And in a number of situations, you see you've got deficiencies in all 3 places. Reed, of course, was very active, and I helped support the effort in the Habre case in Senegal. And of course, that was not a trial that occurred or was to occur in the country where the crimes were committed. Habre had emptied the treasury and been overthrown. He'd been overthrown and then emptied the treasury and moved to Dakar in 1990, and had tried to buy himself as much protection as he could in Dakar. But the victims eventually came there, or eventually stopped by decisions of the Supreme Court of Cour de Cassation in Dakar, continued to fight for justice, got a case going in Belgium, and eventually there was a summit here in Banjul in 2006 that called for Senegal to try Habre in the name of Africa. Senegal passed a statute to do that, but in 2010, the ECOWAS court, the court, the human rights court really, or regional court, said that it would violate his human rights for Senegal to do it on its own because it was a retroactive statute. They passed the statute in 2007. He committed those crimes in 1984 to, or 1982 to 1990 over in Chad, and that you couldn't do. But if there was an international court, then you could. And so there, as far as capacity was concerned, there were donors ready to help Senegal. As far as judges, the Senegalese judges were ready to go. They didn't really have, Habre bought some influence with certain groups up there, but he had, we trusted the Senegalese judges to do an honest job here. So there wasn't really the problem of capacity. There was a big legal problem. And so it was possible to negotiate an agreement between the AU and Senegal that basically overcame the legal problem. It became an international court with the statute. It only had a little bit of internationalization, the statute, and one judge that would be from another African country that would preside at trial, a guy from Burkina Faso, another judge who would preside at appeal, ended up being a judge from Mali. And that's what proceeded there. And that was sufficient to overcome the problem. Here in Gambia, you have a constitution 1997. Now, I was here last time just as the constitution, the new constitution, the proposed constitution, the draft, didn't get the 3/4 or support that it needed in Parliament. I hope that that comes back next time. I very much hope that it does. But we have to live with the reality that the 1997 Constitution may still be the Constitution we deal with. And that Constitution says if this court were to want to try Jammeh, it would take a 2/3 vote of Parliament to overcome that. That would make it much more difficult to prosecute him than others. There's a requirement of 2 levels of review. It's cumbersome enough, but to have to create 2 appeals courts for this process would be a complicated thing. There's no torture law in a time. There's no forcible disappearance or enforced disappearance law that was in effect at the time that Jammeh was in power, and that would be retroactive if you put that into effect. And retroactive is against the Constitution of this country. On the other hand, there was international law in effect at all the times Habre was doing his crimes and that Jammeh was doing his alleged offenses. And so potentially by having an agreement, you can apply international law and avoid this. Now, I know we were talking yesterday with Ami Bensouda and others that, how this would have to be formalized, because if it basically had to go back into the Gambian Supreme Court that would say, no, you can't do this, that would make it pointless. But clearly Gambia has entered into the ICC statute, and under the ICC statute, you can try heads of state, you can do all of these things, and that's a treaty-based court too. So here we're imagining that, and we have the Sierra Leone precedent and the Habre precedent that basically says if you do an agreement with an international organization, apply a statute, the statute complies in all respects with international law, you can overcome the limitations in a constitution like the one of 1997. So that is a major reason to look at this idea. Then there's the capacity issue. And of course, as was noted, we might be able to overcome capacity simply with a specialized division of police and prosecution and judges. But the challenge then would be getting the donor funding to the right place. Some donors like to do training programs. Some might provide digital equipment. Some might do this. But in the end, there's not enough to really to support adequately the kind of investigation, the kind of witness protection, and everything, and victim services that is needed. And so it is valuable to have an international court that can cover, with an internationalized budget, that can cover all of these needs. Additionally, an internationalized court, a hybrid court, is going to have more influence in terms of, for instance, getting Jammeh from Equatorial Guinea. If it's just a question of Gambia saying, please send him, that's one thing. If it's an ECOWAS court saying send him, that's more. If you're talking about protecting witnesses and somebody's at risk, it's much easier to be able to organize to send them to Ghana or Sierra Leone or Nigeria or somewhere if it's an ECOWAS court. If you're seeking assistance of governments in Europe, et cetera, it can be, and in North America, that can also be a value going with that approach. Finally, there's the issue of will, and I think here, certainly from listening to this audience and speaking and knowing so many of you and hearing the speeches, I know there's profound will to do this, but sometimes there's not the will to follow up and to do it and to fulfill the mandate. And presidents run for re-election and make promises, and the process runs out of gas, so to speak. And having a court like this that establishes a mandate, a strategy that decides how many people are going to be prosecuted and how long it's going to take, I think ensures that you're going to have a more complete and independent process. So those are the reasons to look at this particular tool. But of course, it has to be adapted to what works here within the law. And I'll say for my own part that I'm ready to come back here for as long as I draw breath and can ride in a pirogue or manage to get here and to work with the victims, who's always, in my view, the people with the paramount interest in this. But I'm also not just thinking of the victims of crimes that happened between 1994 and 2017. I'm thinking of other victims, those that could be victimized in the 2030s or 2040s or 2050s in the future, unless the rule of law is established, unless a clear message is sent that if you do these crimes, there are going to be consequences. And I was so pleased to see my good friend Tijuan Ganglo, who was such a great partner when I was prosecutor of special court for Sierra Leone. We were prosecuting the former president of his country, not for the crimes he committed in Liberia, but for the crimes he committed in Sierra Leone. But his clear message that there really is no alternative to justice if you want to prevent these crimes in the future and you want to respect the rights of the victims. The bygones be bygones approach, easy as that might be, basically just invites another to do the same thing in the future. So to prevent that is the reason I'm engaged still all over the world now, supported by the U.S. Holocaust Museum under its theme of never again. Of course, that's a promise often broken, but we've got to make sure that promise is kept, and I'm ready and willing to continue to work with you to make sure that the promise of justice is kept here in the Gambia, so that these crimes will never happen again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rab. I think that was really, really helpful, as we think about the mechanism we feel is best for the Gambia. But we also have very much taken note of the offer to assist, and we definitely would be, we will be in touch, I'm sure. Thank you. So now I would invite Mr. Saritan, the president of the Gambia Bar Association, to share his thoughts on mechanisms that is best suited for our country.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bernie. I mean, after having had Stephen Rapp speak, with his wealth of experience and expertise, where do I start? But I'm really honored and privileged to really have access to some of the finest minds as far as personal justice is concerned. Hasty to say community that I'm very fast learner. And like Master Raff said, it is for Gambians to decide what type of one of the accountability that we have to think as a forward conclusion, and what type of accountability Gambians want. It is a Gambian question and requires a Gambian answer. Of course, we have friends who will help or will to help us in the process, but we must own the process. Nobody should tell us or teach us the importance of ensuring that what happened in 20 years should never happen again. I don't think we need to be told by anyone, because we Gambians and our families bore the brunt of that 22 years. And now, what type of accountability is suited for Gambians? I would deconstruct the question so that I can go backwards, and then I can, from there, we can come to where we should get to, in my opinion. I mean, it must be victim-centered. The victim are at the center, first and foremost. So whatever mechanism you have must, first and foremost, tick the victim box. It must be victim-centered. Number two, it must have local ownership. To have legitimacy, it must be locally owned, driven. Because if it's not locally owned and driven, one, it will not be legitimate. Two, it will not be sustainable. So it's very, very critical for whatever system you have to have local ownership, to have so that you can have legitimacy, so we can own, drive, and sustain it. Since we're talking about accountability, we must bring about justice. Those who were victims must have their day. They must have justice. So these are the three principles I think should underpin any accountability mechanism we have, or we should have post the Trrc. Now, bringing back the question, ideally, if our court systems are able to achieve this, then we will not be having this discussion. If you had a very robust court system, they could tick all the three boxes. I think the previous Mr. Barney, when he was presenting, has even shown that some of these advanced countries even fall short of being able to tick these boxes. So I think, one, our court system, which is adversarial, there's no space for a victim. The victim is just a witness. I mean, victims, I mean, I'm sure the family of Solo Sandan will tell you, or Kolo Cisse, late, may the soul rest in peace. They even struggle to get information about court dates. Sometimes we get calls from abroad, when is the next court date? I mean, they have no space in that, I mean, adversarial gladiator, two lawyers fighting, I mean, prosecutor and defense environment. It's not victim friendly. So our adversarial system clearly is not victim friendly. And not to mention things like even witness protection, all those things don't exist at all in our system. Our laws are inadequate. Torture is not a crime under Gambian law. Enforced disappearance is not a crime under Gambian law. Our constitution has clauses that says anything that was not a crime before cannot be made a crime today. So today, if you have a statute that says torture is a crime, it cannot apply retroactively. Our constitution grants his head of state immunity that has to be lifted by 3/4 of the National Assembly. Imagine having to go to parliament before you can charge a Jammeh. And you know what happened to our constitution, as important as it is. So our legal system and framework is not fit for purpose. It was not designed for democracy. It was designed to perpetuate a dictatorship. So we cannot rely on that if we are to bring those people who bear the responsibility. We can't because the law is simply not adequate. And in fact, it's a hurdle for us. For that purpose, and also we have to get the political will and support. Unfortunately, it is easier to get the political will support when you have the international community supporting you, if you have the regional bodies like ECOWAS supporting you. I mean, you are more likely to be listened to. In 2016, we were all shouting here, Gamma's decided. What happened? When the regional forces came up, those things in combination with our local efforts is the reason why we restored our democracy. So the regional element is very critical because it amplifies our voices. So having a court that has a regional backing would actually be very, very important. One, as Stephen Raff said, in terms of asking for Jammeh's extradition. Imagine Gambia going to Equatorial Guinea, asking for Gambia's extradition. We have court cases. We cannot even serve Jammeh. You cannot even serve him any process up to today. If ECOWAS speak to Obiang or his son, it's a different kind of discussion. So it's very important that whatever court we have must have that regional force and backing. So it's not only Gambia. Remember, at least 6 ECOWAS nations have been identified as being victims of Jammeh. I mean, this is just from the Trrc. It could even be more. So that regional backing is critical. So if you look at all these 3 factors, victim-centered, local ownership, and the need to achieve justice, the question is, can we have that within our system? I think I would say it's an emphatic no. That is why it is important to know why the hybrid model is best suited for our country, because it will help us achieve our goals as a country in the sense that we can design it in a way that it will have as much local content as possible and only internationalize to the extent needed. So everything that we can have locally, that can be Gambian, that can be fit for purpose, we have it. Anything that we don't have, we can tap outside. So we can have the best of both worlds. It is not something that is being brought and imposed upon us. It is something that we will design, and we have a lot of Gambian experts in this. I mean, I think Gambians have the highest per capita experts when it comes to TJ processes. I can say that for sure. So we have a lot of brilliant Gambians who are doing it from East Timor, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, you name it. We've been doing it for a very long time. So we have the capacity to bring great Gambian minds together, plus the local capacity, plus our friends, so we can really design a system that will work for us. I mean, so for me, it's a question of being able to get the political will, because after all said and done, we have this process that we started. We've actually brought the best minds in the world, literally speaking, the best mind in the world have come together, written option papers, even drafted model hybrid court rules. I mean, these are people who drafted rules for courts in Rwanda, I mean, Sierra Leone, and even from in Europe. We have the best minds who come together to help Gambia at no cost, zero cost to the government of Gambia. All we want to do is we wanted to say, these are the options you use if you want to, and we have people who help you build your capacity so that you can do it and do it together. So now the question is, will we get the political will? And without the political will, like my brother in Liberia, who I met, I met him 3 weeks ago. I attended a conference in Liberia on ECOWAS trying to start a TJ process, and that's the first time I met him. And when he spoke, it touched my heart. I said, I have to bring you to Gambia. Because in Liberia, after all the work that's been done, 10 years down the line, I mean, it's business as usual. Vested interests transcend national interests. we are seeing exactly the same signs in this country. So it's important that we learn and we demand our sovereign leaders to ensure that this TRRC, it transcends politics, regardless of who is president of Gambia after 4th of December. We must demand that they must implement TRRC recommendation. They must put in place a court that will ensure that those who bear the greatest responsibility are held accountable, so that tomorrow any soldier or government official or even a private citizen will think twice before using the state or directives to hurt their fellow Gambians. On that note, I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I was a journalist, my headline tomorrow would be the President of the Gambia Bar Association supports the setting up of a hybrid system, right?
That's a good headline. I can sign it off.
Or he calls for a hybrid system. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that really was, yeah. So we will watch a BBC video, and after that we will hear from our good friend, Mr. Libertarian. Alisa, the video is called The Mother of West African Migrants. Focus on African Union. Please go on.
A little over a year since President Yahya Jammeh fled the Gambia to live in exile. He's currently in Equatorial Guinea. Now, human rights investigators say they have evidence which could be used to bring Mr. Jammeh to trial on murder charges. Now, if they succeed, it will be down to the determination of the only survivor of one of the worst massacres of Jammeh's 22 years in power. Alex Duval traveled to central Ghana to meet him. Here is his story.
This cemetery is where Martin Chile's dream is buried. He wanted to go to Europe. On the way, in the Gambia, he met with the brutality of Yahya Jammeh's regime. The migrants were accused of being part of a coup plot. In the middle of the night, they were taken to be shot. Only Chere got away.
I jumped from the picture to the forest and I heard the noise of Al-Bashir. Who is that? But I did not look back. I was running. The gunshot and the bullets flew past over where they threw the torchlight and I heard the guy shouting. God sees the and the gunshot followed.
Jammeh reluctantly left the Gambia after 22 years in power. He fled to Equatorial Guinea.
The time I was about to jump from the pickup and I tell the guys, my hand is no more in the book. I get my hand off. I say, God, who wants to save you? So that he said the words, what else am I after? And how he killed.
Martin Chere launched his mission. He traveled hundreds and hundreds of miles around Ghana. He painstakingly traced mothers, widows, brothers, and sisters.
What's happening in this room today is historic. Martin and the victims' families are for the first time meeting international and local human rights campaigners. Their mission now is to fight for former President Yahya Jammeh to be extradited from Equatorial Guinea to face justice here in Ghana.
An investigation by the body ECOWAS found the migrants were killed by rogue elements.
We have new information, and it is clear that the migrants were not killed by rogue elements, but that they were murdered by a paramilitary death squad, the Junglers, that took its orders directly from Yahya Jammeh.
13 years on, Martin Chere has yet to find all the relatives.
For what he has done, I want justice. On behalf of my friends, so I want to see Jammeh in prison.
Martin Chere never got to Europe. His dream is bigger now, to prove that one citizen's efforts can bring a leader to justice. Alex Duval-Smith, BBC News in Ghana.
of the Africa Center for International Law and Accountability has told the BBC that the evidence against former President Jammeh is substantial and sufficient to force his extradition to face charges. The BBC's Thomas Nadi has been speaking to the organization's executive director in Ghana's capital, Accra.
The people who committed these crimes were under direct orders by the President Yahya Jammeh. This is the group that's called the junglers. And these junglers take direct orders from Yahya Jammeh.
How can you be sure that former President Yahya Jammeh gave the direct orders?
The facts and circumstances, as narrated by 11 of the officials who were directly involved, suggest that when all of these was happening, they were in direct contact with the former President Yahya Jammeh.
Has there been any response from the former president?
We put out this information today. There has been no response yet, but we expect that he might come up with a response in his exile state of Equatorial Guinea.
What will have to happen for there to be an extradition?
First, we would encourage the state of Ghana to try to independently establish the facts which have been put forward. And then after that, based on the nature of the facts and the evidence that they also uncover, they will seek an extradition request from Equatorial Guinea.
Now, isn't it wishful thinking that Equatorial Guinea will grant your extradition request?
It's a legitimate question, but depending on the law that we are using, and some of this is enforced appearances, also torture was involved. And under the Torture Convention, to which the Equatorial Guinea has ratified, the state of Equatorial Guinea, if an extradition request is sent to them, will be under an obligation and international law to extradite or prosecute.
Have you met the president of Ghana?
We have met with the president, and we're quite hopeful that the president is going to be seized of this matter. We can say, without going into the details of our discussion, that the president was engaged.
Dear Gambian and international friends, give me a great pleasure to address this conference on the implement.
That's for the next panel. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, the last speaker on this panel is our good friend, Mr. Brody. You heard from Farida Simon that his involvement in everything Gambian did not start after 2016. He was very much there before 2016, particularly when some of our activists, some of our victims needed him the most. Reid is a lawyer with a wealth of experience, very much involved in the Heartbreak trial. I think the involvement went over 20 years. Still going on. Yeah, still going on, yes. I mean, worked for the ICJ. Yeah, that's right, for so many years. So Reid, I'm sure most people in this room know who you are. So you have the floor. We really would want to hear your thoughts on what mechanism you think is best under the circumstances for the Gambia.
Thank you, Gay, and thank you, everyone. I will be very brief because people have said the main things. The reason we wanted to show this video, in addition to showing how much weight I lost since then, was that to highlight the regional aspect of this case. The worst massacre of the Yahya Jammeh period was the case against the migrants. We believe that 59 West African migrants were killed here. Over 40 from Ghana, 9 from Nigeria, 3 from Senegal, 2 from Togo, 2 from Cote d'Ivoire, 1 from Liberia, 1 from Sierra Leone, 1 from Congo. And as both Stephen and Sal said, this makes politically a huge difference. First of all, it shows why ECOWAS would be the appropriate partner for a trial like this, because you have citizens of 7 ECOWAS countries who were killed. But also because, as Sal said, getting, at the end of the day, Yahya Jammeh is in Equatorial Guinea.
And the president of Equatorial Guinea, despite what my friend William, despite what international law says, the president of Equatorial Guinea, he said he's going to protect Yahya Jammeh. We've seen them dancing together on New Year's Eve a few years ago. So it's going to take a lot of mobilization of political will. And if we get Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, these other countries, I think it would be very difficult for even the president of Equatorial Guinea to say no. Now we met with, and Aisha Jammeh was with us when William Nyarko and others, we met with the president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, and he was of course the foreign minister at the time of the massacre. He came here. He was run out of town by Yahya Jammeh, who later in the press mocked mocked Nana Akufo-Addo. Please. So, you know, Ghana did not move forward with this case because they said it was really up to Gambia. But the point is that if Gambia has the political will to move forward, if Ghana, if Nigeria join, then we have, I think, the possibility of creating a mechanism. The two other points I want to make quickly are, as Stephen said, when you create a court, you can create it in order to meet the necessities of a situation. You can purpose build. Obviously, you have to protect equality of arms and due process and a fair trial. But you can create a court, for instance, that honors the victims in a way that traditional common law procedure does not. In international courts at the ICC and elsewhere, victims have a role. Different courts have given them different kinds of roles. Obviously, in Senegal, in the hybrid court in Senegal, it was under Senegalese procedure. The victims were actually parties to the case. You had the prosecutor, you had the defense, and you had the victims who were represented by a Chadian lawyer, Jacqueline Mudena, who was here, who many of you know, who was able to present a case, to cross-examine witnesses. And that's something I think that, you know, if it were possible here, it would certainly be something that would bring the victim, that would honor what the victims did and give them a voice in the process. You could have, for instance, the trial, you can make sure the trial is televised. I don't think any of us want to go through all of this and have a trial held in a courtroom that nobody has access to. You can write in the court rules that the trial has to be televised. You can also, and I think this is a very important question, many people feel that if the former president was extradited, it might not be the best thing from a security and stability point of view to have Yahya Jammeh incarcerated in the Gambia and a space trial in the Gambia. Now maybe that situation is changing. It's certainly not for us to say that, but a special hybrid court could say, as the Charles Taylor court said, we're going to sit in the Gambia, we're going to hold the trials in the Gambia, but if we need, we can hold the trial of the former president in a neighboring country, in Sierra Leone or in Ghana or in Senegal under English, obviously have to be in English. So it does seem that a kind of a hybrid court would be the best way to honor the victims, to have a fair trial, to have as much as Stephen said, as much Gambian elements as possible and as much international assistance as is strictly needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. I think this really was extremely important